Okay, committee, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We have a conferee that needs to leave quickly. He's got another committee meeting right now, and so we're going to start with HB 2701, and that's the Rural Housing Incentive District Act that we passed last year. This is a change to that, and I'll let Charles Reimer explain what we're doing.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2701 expands the Kansas Rural Housing Incentive District Act just a bit. The first thing you'll see on page 1 of the bill is some language that is stricken. That's just a technical change. The bill does expand the act with respect to projects that would be a qualified census tract as defined by the Federal Housing and Urban Development Agency, and those could be within a city without really any limitation on that. However, that designation would only be applicable to the provision in the act that permits vertical building for residential purposes, for a building within a city district that we added last year. And so that's basically what the bill does. It just adds that provision that renovation of buildings, if you look on page 2 of the bill, renovation of buildings or other structures more than 25 years of age, primarily for residential use, located in a central business district or in a business or commercial district within a qualified census tract, as approved by the Secretary of Commerce. So for purposes of that, use of loan proceeds under the Act, we're going to allow that to be done within a city, within a qualified census tract. And the definition of a qualified census tract is it's an area that's defined basically by, like I said, the Housing and Urban Development. It's more than 50% of households with incomes below 60% of the area median gross income, or have a poverty rate of 25% or more. Stand for questions.
Any questions for the revisor? Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has a familiar ring to it. Did we do something like this in the last couple of years?
Yes, we did. We changed the program by actually, if I recall correctly, permitting vertical development for those buildings. The exact same provision that we're adding now, the ability to, with respect to census tracts within a city. So we added that, if I recall correctly, we added that provision last year. And we also changed the scope of the act a little bit. We made changes to the definition of county and city with respect to the population. So we made those changes last year.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, if you recall, last year Representative Curtis wanted to. This is for rural areas, and she thought it would be a good idea to be able to use this in the urban areas that are distressed, specifically her county. And there was a promise made by the Secretary of Commerce that he would go out there and visit with her and come up with a similar program. This ended up being the fix, just to make sure that we were able to use this on the inner cities that are distressed Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to kind of refresh the memory, like in Kansas City, we had a whole bunch of little cities at one time that, became Kansas City, Kansas. So like if you go down to the area Argentine, Strong Avenue, there's like a, 4-block area there that very much mirrors, many of our small towns. And these are areas that are in the distressed part of our community that could really use this tool to kind of renovate those spaces and provide some affordable living upstairs while providing also retail on the bottom floors. So that was what we had talked about last year, and we just didn't get it done. And so therefore we have this bill coming forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to clarify, because I know we have other tools that have evolved over time, such as neighborhood revitalization plans, where they are meant for distressed areas, but now they're used for an entire city in many places. So in this case, though, it is only in the qualified census tract. You can't qualify anywhere in the county just because you have a qualified census tract. It is actually keeping it, defining it in the distressed area. Is that correct?
Charles.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, sir. First up, we have Representative Baker to his area actually took advantage of this last year, and he has a success story to share with us. I thought it would be interesting to hear some positive things about the work we did last year, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I will tell you that this bill has been one of the biggest changers in my community, in Council Grove, that we've had in 40 years. We have had more businesses start in our community in the first floor. They're using the second floor for their apartments, their VRBOs, their Airbnbs. We have literally had a renaissance downtown. We have a new, of course, the first thing we had to do is get a brewery. The Riverbank Brewery right there on the Neosho River. It's an unbelievable facility. It cantilevers right out over the Neosho River, and they just had that open now about 2 months, so they're kind of getting their legs underneath them. That's one of the businesses that came about as these buildings downtown were being renovated, and we have more activity downtown. That generation of that 30 to 45-year-old student that grew up there in Council Grove, went up to college, we've had some ability to bring them back. Plus, they've been able to bring some of their friends back. We probably had 25 to 50 new young people move back to town in the last 2 years. A lot of those people work remotely. They're starting these businesses in that first floor, and they're taking advantage of these RHID incentives. Can't begin to tell you what a wonderful experience it is to watch your downtown come back to life. I stood there in December, and I got a call from the Secretary of Commerce, who obviously was as desperate as me for something to do on a Saturday afternoon, and there was nowhere to park in our downtown. It was completely full, and that hasn't happened for a long time in Council Grove on a Saturday afternoon. So I can't, I have a video that I shared with some of you on one of the young ladies who did one of the RHID projects. We have the people from the new event center that's going in. He's going to be the chairman of KLA next year. The Tiffany's, they're in the building. They presented in rural development the other day. But they all have great success stories to share. Those businesses are making money. Those businesses are going to contribute to the local sales tax base. Those buildings will go back on the tax roll in the years to come as commercial properties. It's a big time win for everybody. You're taking buildings that were literally falling down and rehabbing those and putting those back to use in a positive commercial way. You can't just continue to let those things fall down because you've already provided so many government services to them already. Your ability to put those back on the tax roll and make them a contributor, to me, that's the goal, to get them back on the tax roll and adding to the tax base. So be glad to answer any questions. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and I'd be glad to bring you more pictures, and it's an ongoing deal all the time. We've got new bakeries in town. We've got new art shops in town. We have new coffee shops in town. This young lady that you're going to see has a company called Weathered Wood. I don't understand it. She goes out and finds these old barnwood things and makes things. I don't understand anything. I'm not who she's trying to target market, but that's okay. And the list goes on and on. My attorney had this building that we used to use for a haunted house and play basketball in upstairs. He put the building for sale for $50,000, immediately took it off the market, made it $150,000, sold it a week later, and it's going to be renovated into one of these facilities also. But it's just very encouraging. I think Alma, I think I saw that they had a building up there. You know all about that, Representative. And they've done a great job doing that. But we're seeing success stories in Emporia, Junction City, Council Grove, Alma. As people understand this, there's more people taking advantage of it. It's a great project, and it's a great use of state tax dollars. So I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you for that. And the video that he referenced, I'll get to Cindy and she'll email them to everybody. Representative Williams has a question for you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so I think we may need a refresher on the NRID program, what those incentives are, and how do those incentives compare to the NRP, which most communities, certainly most small communities have. And for the community that may not be familiar, that means that you can take a tax abatement up to, I think, maybe 90% of any of the investments of the improvement of the building. So what's the difference between that? How did your community use the NRP prior? Do you use both at the same time? Tell us a little bit about the layering and what this incentive program actually does monetarily that the NRP may not have done.
So what the RHID they used locally was the tax delay. It deferred the property tax increases from rehabbing the building for a period of years. And I'm going to, depending on the community, the county commissioners set what that was, whether it was 5 years or 10 years. They were the ones that set that parameter. The ones we took advantage of in Council Grove is only for the second story. It's the ones that have a business on it. It's vertical. It's the vertical deal. That's the ones we took advantage of that I am familiar with.
Okay, so I think maybe the revisers might be able to help us or somebody else because the NRP will take care of the entire building. So as long as it's in a distressed area, that is what that program does. It provides up to 10 years of tax abatement on any of those improvements, and all communities have access to that economic development tool. So maybe there will be someone at some point that can differentiate between what this does and what that existing tool does.
So I think, so they hired professional people to come in and help navigate these things, and this is the one they landed on. And so I don't know what you have available there. I don't know if that's just through city government where those deferments are, or county, or if it's a combination of both. I do not know. All I know is the one that they took advantage of.
Okay, it sounds exactly like the neighborhood revitalization, which is available to all cities. I'm not sure about counties, but that's where you're going to have 2-3-story buildings. That's where you're going to have vertical growth. But perhaps revisers or someone can weigh in on why this was uniquely better or different or what it might be. Thank you, Mr.
This one
Chairman.
just addressed the commercial downtown districts.
So does the other one. So that's why I'm so confused.
I
Thank
invite you to come look at it sometime.
Charles, can you answer that?
Chairman, no, I would not be able to answer why they chose this particular course.
I mean, the differences in the program. Are you aware of the program?
No, I'd have to do a little research on that.
Okay. Okay. Department of Commerce. Do you know the differences? Representative, if you need to go, you can go. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't speak to his specific example. I will just reiterate that the neighborhood stabilization program is really focused on the foreclosures in abandoned homes and residential properties. So unless his particular properties or in that example were dealing with foreclosures or abandonment, I don't know if it would qualify.
Representative Williams.
Unless the program's the NRP, it's not the same as the one that you just mentioned. Unless it has been abandoned, then it still exists today. And I think it's very much used widely in municipalities. I know in my city, they expanded it to the entire city. So it wasn't just a distressed area. It was the entire city. And it's called NRP. Maybe someone can take a look at that tool and get us, or I can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, committee, we have written testimony from Mark Toom with the Realtors. That's online. And there are no more, there's no one else here to testify on that bill, so I'm going to close the hearing on HB 2701. And we'll move on to HB 2703. I'll open the hearing on that bill, and we'll get a description from Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be brief with this because I assume the Department of Labor and Mr. Hayes will be presenting extensive testimony on this bill. This is 2703, just makes some sort of technical changes and updates to employment security law, basically the large bill that was passed last year. Some of those changes are to the tables. There were some negative signs that were missing, and so those are added. In addition, some of the tables, the decimal places are pared down to 2 decimal places for the benefit of the Department of Labor's system. There's also a change to the definition of employment in the definition section of our labor law with respect to a government entity. The changes on page 7 of the bill, lines 14 and 15, and it's just changing this state to a state so that political subdivisions or other government instrumentalities of another state who have employees in this state can qualify under the unemployment insurance law. There are several changes that were made to the My Employment Plan, which the committee recalls was passed last year. Those are found on page 34 and subsequent pages of the bill. There's a little bit of a change to the language with respect to who is required to participate. It's just changed from a reference to specific exemptions to just a general reference to claimants who, would be exempt from work search requirements or not required to participate. There's some other changes as well. A reference in the middle of page 34, instead of 3 continuous weeks to a 3rd week of benefits with respect to when the names and contact information of claimants are to be provided to the Secretary of Commerce by the Secretary of Labor. Just a difference requirement that the claimant upload or create a complete resume that includes a skills assessment component, and also it's changed to in the Kansas workforce system. There's a provision that just some realignment of responsibilities with respect to the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Commerce. And the Secretary of Commerce may require that claimants participate in reemployment services. There's an extension of time frame for a claimant to respond to the Secretary of Commerce. That's instead of 7 is 14 days. There's on page 35, we're removing some language that basically says the Secretary of Commerce is to facilitate and oversee the program, or rather the claimant and employer interview process. We're removing specific references to certain programs with respect to work skills training or retraining, just programs that are appropriate. The Secretary of Commerce can refer claimants to, in general, programs that the Secretary of Commerce believes are appropriate. And we have some changes to, with respect to providing information about participation. We're adding that educational institutions are to provide information and kind of monitor compliance with participation in some of the work skills training or retraining programs. So that's some of the changes in this bill, and stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for reviser? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll open the proponent section of the bill hearing. We have down Deputy Secretary Peter Brady as proponent. However, we have not received any testimony so far. Did we not receive it? Oh, okay, never mind. I'm sorry, I misunderstood her. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good to be back. For those of you I have not worked with yet, my name is Peter Brady. I'm the Deputy Secretary here at the Kansas Department of Labor. Here's a proponent on House Bill 2703. And if you don't have a copy of my written testimony, I can make sure that that's provided, but it lays out in more detail what I'll summarize briefly here. We are in favor of this bill. We worked with Kansas SHRM, the Chamber, and the Department of Commerce. Really, the genesis of this legislation is this committee and the legislature did a lot of great and much needed work in House Bill 2196 last session. There are just a few very minor items to clean up. The first two are solely technical in nature. So adding some negative signs to the fund control table, and then taking some decimal places off of the credit and solvency rate schedules. The reason we're taking the decimal places down is, one, we don't think 5 decimal places to 2 is a material change that's going to drastically change the dollar amount for a tax figure for a business. But for the mainframe system we still have today, we would have to do some development on that system to change the value field in the mainframe to accept 5 decimal places. This eliminates the need for us to touch the mainframe, and those of you that have heard me testify last session, anything we can do to avoid that is beneficial to the agency. The third piece is a conformity issue that we identified. It's very small in nature, but we feel we need to address it. The current definition of employment speaks to state employers as this state. So the only state employer in the state of Kansas can be the state of Kansas. Federal Unemployment Tax Act, or FUTA, requires in that framework that we recognize any state as a state employer. So for example, if the state of Missouri had some type of entity within our state and we need to recognize their employee, this would bring them under that umbrella. We don't think this is a substantial issue, but it is a conformity issue. One thing I'll note too, and this came up last year several times when discussing House Bill 2196, our law is required to be in conformity with the federal unemployment laws, which is the Federal Unemployment Tax Act and the Social Security Act. Failure to be in substantial conformity with that will initiate a conformity review process with the U.S. Department of Labor. That is a longer process, but the potential penalty at the end of it is USDOL can either, one, remove the FUTA tax credit that all employers in the state of Kansas receive, or potentially take away administrative funding for the agency to administer unemployment. Again, we are very far from getting to that point, but I did want to make sure to emphasize the potential consequences of not addressing a conformity issue. And then, Mr. Chairman, the final piece of the legislation I'll speak to is related to my reemployment plan. There's a few cleanup provisions there that I'll let the Department of Commerce speak to. The one that I'll speak to from the Department of Labor is who's excluded from my reemployment plan. Members of the committee will recall that we excluded some specific groups in the initial legislation. What's proposed in this legislation is lining up my reemployment plan with the requirement to search for work. One of the core pillars of the unemployment system is that someone must be able and available for work and searching for work. There are some exceptions to that in some specific programs where work search isn't required. What we are trying to do in this legislation is to say, if you are an individual on unemployment and you fall under the work search requirement, you are also required to participate in the My Reemployment Plan. And our hope in structuring the language that way is that if other parts of the statute or regulation are changed at any point in the future, MRP and the work search requirement will continue to remain linked in that manner. And Mr. Chairman, that's the summary of my legislation. Again, the written copy goes into a little bit more detail, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Yes, sir, and thank you for explaining your testimony and not reading it. You're always good like that. So, Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Peter, nice to have you back. I missed you after all the time we spent on the Unemployment Modernization Improvement Council. So congratulations on the new addition to your family. The question that I have is just a point of clarification that I'm not sure if you would speak to this or if Department of Commerce would speak to this, but just in regards to how hiring halls fit into my reemployment, because it's my understanding that if we, say, have a journeyman carpenter who is out of work for whatever reason, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to, who would normally make $22 an hour, to then go and work at McDonald's and for a little bit, and then all of a sudden they're getting hired back, they're hitting their stride. It's so, tell me how that works, walk me through, because we have discussed potential language here, but I'm wondering if there's a need for it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. Happy to be back with you all. I got a little jealous when you were talking to another deputy secretary for a few weeks, and it wasn't me this time around. But to address your question, Representative, so the union hiring hall piece is addressed in regulation currently, and this is part of the reason we wanted to change the statute for MRP, because when that was drafted, the groups we exempted were the shared work program, the trade readjustment assistance program, and then temporary layoffs with a return to work date. But we failed to encompass that group, which is otherwise normally exempt from the work search requirement. So this helps kind of align in terms of making sure we're capturing everybody that is not required to search for work, is not required to do MRP, but also the converse of that, which is if you need to search for work, let's ensure we get you enrolled in this program and get you the resources and assistance from Commerce that are helping you get reemployed.
Any further questions? Wow, things changed, aren't they? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Next up, we have Phil Hayes with the Arnold Group. Welcome back to committee, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Years ago, I was told to go on a data diet. This may actually be a record piece of testimony that I'm going to present today, down to a single page. And quite honestly, Revisor Reimer really addressed a lot of the issues. Deputy Secretary Brady hit on a lot of the clarifications. I do want to say I'm not only with the Arnold Group, but standing on before you today on behalf of Kansas SHRM. We've had ongoing conversations with the Kansas Chamber, NFIB, and Kansas SHRM, along with Department of Commerce and Labor since the beginning of the year, to really try to just streamline this. So a lot of the language there that Deputy Secretary Brady was just hitting on is really just cleanup language, so we don't have to keep worrying about carve-outs as different things come up through the years. It's just a straight line, streamlined approach on that. The technical cleanups on the minus signs, certainly the intent was there. We're just addressing that. So other than that, I just want to stand up in support of this bill, and I think it really is going to help us with some efficiencies and gains for the administrators of the program, and it's certainly supported by the business community.
Any questions? Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm reading your last point on E, 4E. It says not included in 2703. Would you like to reiterate that a little bit?
Commerce and Labor and I had a conversation yesterday, and there may be an opportunity. It's not a missed opportunity if it's not included in this bill, but looking at some call scheduling software just to create additional efficiencies. If we go that route with this bill, or if it's amended in the Senate, we would likely need to readjust the implementation date for this bill to allow time to, number one, go to market, identify a solution, and then provide ample opportunity for them to administer and implement that. The consensus was July 1, if that language was included, would be doable, and that would allow enough runway to put those systems in place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could you explain what that was again, the call scheduling software?
The scheduling platform, just to help with efficiency, that if Commerce wanted to engage a claimant that needed different elements within the My Reemployment Plan. Some candidates may need just resume help. Others may need additional soft skills, interview, et cetera. So the scheduling is really a communication mechanism that we can engage utilizing technology with those potential claimants to maybe get on a more intensive track of the My Reemployment services that are offered under the Kansas Work System.
I would think that anything we could do to help Kansans get in touch with the Department of Labor and Commerce would be a good thing. Representative Hoffman, you are familiar with the possible new company that's going to be doing the modernization. Would this be something that they would probably do anyway, or in that program? Can you answer that?
I'm not sure I can answer whether or not that it would be part of it, but I am, in talking to them, I know that they are able to integrate, with the Department of Commerce. So I'm sure it's something that can be integrated into the system.
I would bet that the Modernization Council could address that with as the new company comes on. Deputy Secretary, did you raise your hand? You need something?
I was going to add, just from the mainframe comments earlier, the advice would likely be to stay away from the mainframe and trying to stack that on, at least under the labor's umbrella. And if there's a viable alternative for commerce that makes sense, I don't know legislatively that it needs to be in statute, because I think there's a shared goal that we can all march towards together, because we do want efficiency gains as a whole.
Deputy Secretary.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just to add a little bit more context, we've been having conversations with Mike Bean at Commerce, who many of you are familiar with, really trying to understand, not only can we just get people enrolled in MRP, but how do we get the best outcome for those claimants? The Department of Commerce, and I'll let them speak to this in their testimony, but feels that they have more bandwidth to potentially help individuals. So the discussion has been, how do we find ways to proactively reach out to engage these individuals in some really great services that Commerce and the workforce centers offer. The genesis of this conversation was a program called RESEA, which is a USDOL program that takes economic data, identifies a pool of individuals who are likely to not become reemployed by the time their benefits would expire. You identify those claimants at about week 7 in their claim process and refer them to workforce services. The mainframe system has a module that was built sometime in the 80s or 90s that allows us to kind of schedule services with Commerce for those individuals. We looked at potentially the question of, could that be helpful for MRP? And the short answer was, and to what Mr. Hayes said, we really don't want to touch the mainframe and try and take a program that services a few hundred claimants and make it work for our entire claimant population. That being said, and I think this is what Mr. Hayes was kind of speaking to, there are probably solutions out there that we could leverage to help scheduling and get those individuals connected for services. So that's a conversation that's ongoing between our agencies. And then another point I think you were getting at, Mr. Chairman, is, do we really need to put something in statute to find a way to better serve those Kansans? So that's an ongoing conversation, certainly something myself, Mike, and anybody else can speak to this committee at, or the council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions? On a different subject, the last time you were up here, we talked about an uptick in possible fraud. Is that problem taking care of itself, or where are we on that?
My indicators have really subsided,
Okay,
and I think it was worthy, at least for the discussion. Peter and his team were very forthright through those discussions. We were really seeing the same things at the same time, but those were, by and large, really just kind of a second filing of the initial bad actor claims that had expired their initial benefit year. They were already previously marked. Initial claims and continued claims are still now at pre-pandemic levels. So we're certainly encouraged in the direction that we're going.
I love it when a plan comes together. Thank you. I see no further questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today in support of House Bill 2703. I'll keep our testimony shorter than Phil's and just say us too. I think everybody did good work in trying to get something done, and might be an unemployment insurance bill that could go to consent calendar, but probably not. So, but no, happy to answer any questions and appreciate the work from Department of Commerce, Department of Labor, and everybody else who's worked on this over the last few months. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other proponents to testify. The Department of Commerce, did you want to weigh in on this? We did not receive any testimony from you. No? Okay. We do have written proponent, and that's Kevin Walker with the Overland Park Chamber. We do not have any opponents. And with that, I will close the bill hearing on HB 2703. Stand by, please. Committee, I'll call your attention to HB 2688. That's the farm winery bill that we heard the other day. I want to try to work that bill today. It's been a while, so I forgot how to work bills. But with a motion, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we pass HB 2688 out of committee favorably.
Seconded by Representative Clayton. We'll get a brief description of what the bill does from Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. As the committee will recall, House Bill 2688 deals with farm winery licenses, specifically with farm wineries who also wish to obtain a cereal malt beverage license. And it provides in the middle of page 2 that if an applicant has been issued a farm winery license, then or a producer license, then an application for a retailer's license shall be approved by the Board of County Commissioners or the Director, subject to the requirements of subsections B and C. So the intent of, or the language of this bill is to remove discretion that with respect to the county or the Director to approve a license if a CMB license for a farm winery. If the farm winery meets the requirements, then they are to be issued a license.
Any questions for the revisor on this? Seeing none, thank you. Open for discussion, Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't planning that we were going to be working this today, so I don't have an amendment written out, but there is an amendment that I'd like to make to this bill. And it's very simple. I think everyone can follow along. In line 8, or actually it's line 9, after it says the director shall, just delete everything between the 2 commas so that it reads, the director shall issue a license to the applicant.
Representative that was an amendment that I had discussed with the reviser, and I think he has an amendment that's written that could cause some issues, but that does the same thing. Would you like to review that?
I would certainly wait for the chair's amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Charles, would you like to?
Or am I offering that your amendment? I don't.
Right. Would
I'm
you
good
like
with that
to-
too, I
Would
guess.
you like to distribute that amendment for Representative? The ABC director's issues and the licensing issue for, yeah. My apologies, sir. I didn't realize you had them all separate. Thank you. So Charles, if we could, since they're separate, can we start with the issue that Representative Sutton is trying to address?
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. So if the committee would turn its attention to the sheet of paper that basically is labeled House Bill number 2688. And one of the things you'll see on that is if you turn to page 2, there's some additional language inserted on line 15, which attempts to go to Representative Sutton's point. And then there's also some additional language adding the governing body of the city. If the committee will recall, the director of ABC had testimony at our hearing, and she had actually 3 technical suggestions. And so the balloon before you is one aspect of addressing the technical suggestions referenced by the director of ABC, and specifically that was, her suggestion was to add governing body of a city to subsection D there on page 2. And then in addition, We've added some other language that references the grant of discretion in A, and just to refresh the committee's memory, so if you look at page 1 of the bill, on page 1, subsection A, you'll see that the language is slightly different with respect to Board of County Commissioners or Directors. So there's a language referenced by Representative Sutton that states if they approve the same. So they have some discretion. The city, if you look at the language with respect to the city on lines 10 and 11, it just says that the governing body of the city shall issue a license. Now, of course, subsection A is applicable to all license applicants for CMB, and in subsection D on page 2, we're just talking about farm wineries and producers. Additionally, on this balloon, there's some references to attachments. And those attachments are A and B. Those are additional subsections. And A and B also address the Director of ABC's suggestions in her testimony. So attachment A amends 41.311. As she suggested, if you look at, I don't know if you have her testimony handy, but she noted that 41.311A10 should be amended because it prohibits the issuance of a license under the Liquor Control Act if the applicant already holds a CMB license. So that's what we're doing with attachment A. If you look at the bottom of the page, that text there, we're amending paragraph 10 to provide that, a farm winery or producer shall be eligible to receive a license under the Kansas Liquor Control Act. Sub-attachment B is also in response to the ABC Director's suggestions. This attachment amends 41.2704. As the committee may recall, she indicated that 41.2704G prohibited alcoholic liquor from being possessed by anyone on the premises of a CMB retailer unless the retailer is also licensed as a club or drinking establishment. So her suggestion was that farm wineries and producers would need to be added to the statute so that individuals could possess wine at a farm winery or producer. And so if you look on page 2 of attachment B at the bottom of the page, you'll see that we're adding language that exempts farm wineries and producers from that restriction that otherwise applies. Do you want me to proceed, or?
That addresses his issues. I mean, he's got a lot of issues.
Yes, Chairman, the attachments I have discussed address the issues presented by the Director of ABC in her testimony.
Okay, Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is exactly what I was describing. Now, this goes quite a bit further, but there was one phrase here, and I know that we use this phrase, Charles, and it's been cooked into our statutes forever. But I am a little bit curious on when we're on attachment A here. On number 5, if you've been a proprietor of a gambling house, pandering, or other crime, and I'm glad they said crime, because otherwise this would really concern me, but opposed to decency and morality, what do we have on the books that still qualifies? And this has nothing to do with the bill, just in general.
I'd have to do some research on that, maybe visit with our criminal law revisors. I'm not sure what exactly they would be referencing. I guess, prostitution would obviously come to mind.
Yeah, there's that. Okay.
But I'm sure there would be other crimes that would fit within that.
Excellent. It's just decency and morality are things that I think we've pretty much legislated all of those away anyway. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Williams. Question for the reviser.
I do have a question for the reviser. Okay, so on this morality bill, I wanted to look at, when we're referencing the attachment B, and we, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in, it says regulations concerning the morals, sanitary, and health conditions. And my neighbor to my right here explains to me the reasons we might have moral in there. But my question really is it for all those reasons that are listed on this part of the bill here, on all the lines that lists, you can't have a felony and your spouse can't have a felony. But my question kind of comes back to the subjective line on line 14 and 15 that doesn't really reference those things that are unlawful. It just references character. It says a person who is not of good character and reputation in the community. And so I guess my question is, could it be interpreted that alone could be a reason for them not getting their license?
I'm sorry, Representative, what line 15 and 16 on what page?
On the bill.
On the first page?
Yeah, because moral is thrown all over there, and it gives specific examples, but that one's not specific. It's just about moral character. So it's just more of a curiosity if when this Director Beavers provided amendments and moral was listed in attachment B, I think she's probably just referencing to the list of things that you can't have done, like felony, or is it referencing line 14 and 15, or what is exactly referencing, or is it referencing what Representative Sutton was speaking to? I'm just not sure.
I would have to defer to the Director of ABC on that.
And would that just be subjective to the director to determine?
I mean, right, and obviously, that's very subjective, as you noted, so.
And the only thing I would note to the committee is we just had a bill in which we listened to today about rules and regulation, and then this is an example where decisions can be made, regulatory decisions can be made. And in this case, it's kind of humorous, but what if it's you? And I don't know how that moral character might change over a period of time. So I just didn't know how it was going to be applied. And I do understand that this is typical in liquor legislation, but for the will of the discussion, or for the good of the discussion, I just thought I'd ask. Thank you.
That is current legislation right now, though. The only change we're making is the underlined part. Okay. All right. Got it.
I mean, I just, out of curiosity.
I do. Representative Clayton.
Thank you. And Mr. Reimer, so my question is this, I guess, just to piggyback off a little bit of what the previous representative said, is there a statutory guidepost or definition of what moral character or what good character means and reputation? If there's a definition, then we're solid.
I would have to search the statutes and see.
Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not talking about the moral character. What I would like to do is talk about some of these amendments, if I may, Charles. And Mr. Chairman, I have.
Go ahead, sir.
I have a question. I'm looking at attachment D, as in David. I believe it's the second page of one of the 3 pages. Attachment C is on the front, then it goes to attachment D. I noticed that is different than some of the other amendments. I'm talking about the underlined language, the new language that is proposed for 41-2608. down at the bottom, the last sentence says, such license shall not be denied on the basis of any zoning regulation or other regulation, ordinance, or resolution of any city or county. Basically, we're taking away home rule on local government to make a decision on that license.
We are actually clearing up the statute because we already did take away home rule. These are agribusinesses, and so they are regulated by the Department of Agriculture. And the reason for the bill is we have some counties that simply won't issue the DE license or the CMB license. They won't sign off on it because they want additional regulations or control over the business when it's an agribusiness.
Well, I understand that, Mr. Chairman, but the other amendments are stated differently. It says notwithstanding, where this one says shall not be denied.
Again, we're trying to be very clear so that it can't be misunderstood, I guess.
Well, and I appreciate it. I just wanted to bring to the attention of the body that those are two different amendments worded differently. So, yeah. All right, thank you.
I understand there is some redundancy there, but we just wanted to be clear that there was really no way around it. Representative Dodson.
Yeah, my question is a little bit similar. The discussion that we had the other day had to do with zoning, not with the licensing. In other words, there's a dichotomy between a county not zoning properly so you can have an agribusiness or you can have a commercial enterprise on agricultural land. So on B, at the very top there, it says regulations concerning the moral, sanitary, and health conditions of places licensed pursuant to this act and may establish zones within which no such place may be located. I'm not sure that's the same meaning of zoning, but it sounds the same.
What attachment are you on, sir?
B. At the very top of B, at the bottom of the first paragraph.
That's the current statute. Charles?
Yes.
So, I guess my question is, based on that discussion, have we eliminated any kind of conflict between a county zoning ordinance and the licensing of one of these organizations?
So, Representative, I think that the licensing takes effect after there has been a designation that it's a farm winery and an agribusiness. That first step wouldn't be able to happen with this paragraph. Once they are a farm winery is where they're running into the issues of getting their additional licenses.
Chairman?
Yes.
If I may. So, and another difference is that attachment B is actually the cereal malt beverage provisions. So, attachments C, D, and E go to liquor by the drink, a drinking establishment license, those kind of things. And so, if the chairman would want to also make that exclusion with respect to 412704 and did not think that the other changes in the bill would be adequate, then we could also do that to the cereal malt beverage provisions in 412704.
Could you say that again?
I'm sorry. 412704 is part of the cereal malt beverage provisions of our liquor laws. The attachments C, D, and E, which are separate, these all reference agritourism businesses, which, as the chairman indicated, are regulated by Department of Agriculture, and there are specific provisions for those. And with respect to those registered agritourism operators, I guess as the language is used, the intent of attachments C, D, and E with respect to farm winery license and producers licenses, and with respect to drinking establishment licenses, is to prevent a county or city from denying a license to an agritourism operator, as the chairman had previously explained. So that's what this is about. With respect to cereal malt beverage, there's the intent of CD&E is in a sense accomplished. You know, if you recall what Mr. Duncan said at the hearing, the original intent of making that change was actually to deal with those zoning issues. I mean, that was the original intent of 2668. So I guess what I'm saying is that if the committee believes that additional changes similar to attachment C, D, and E need to be done with respect to the Cereal Malt Beverage Act, then we could certainly do that as just apply the same language. But right now, with respect to the Cereal Malt Beverage Act, there are only the changes that you see on House Bill 2688 on page 2 that basically, provides that the license shall be issued. Did that help?
A little bit, but I believe that the change on attachment B was intended to avoid a possible conflict that the director pointed out, that if you have a CMB, like if they shall be issued a CMB, they then cannot get a DE. Correct. And we wanted them to be able to get the DE, and that's why that language is added as an exemption. Correct?
Yeah, because the current language in the law would prohibit anyone from actually possessing alcoholic liquor on a farm winery or a producer's property without a drinking establishment license. So this tries to fix that.
Okay. Any other questions? Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe, let me ask a question, if I may, Chuck, and committee. Help me understand. If we have within a city a winery that is an agribusiness and they wanted to apply for CMB, they can do that without denial of the local unit of government if they are an agribusiness within the city limits.
That's the way it should be. That's the way it is intended. But there is one county that doesn't participate. Most other counties, they just issue it. That's how it's supposed to happen. But when it comes to that point in one county, the answer is no. Representative Clayton.
Is the county you're referencing the county of Johnson?
Yes, it is. Any other questions? Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, back to Representative Burrows' question. Are there any farm wineries within the city limits that we know of?
I don't think I don't know that there would be, because it's agriculture land.
Right. It has to be zone A.
Representative Probst.
So I guess that leads me to ask the question, how do we define
how does something qualify as an agribusiness? Do we have like acreage assigned to that, or can I turn my backyard into an agribusiness?
There is a definition in the law, and I guess I don't have that up here with me. So I can try and get that for you.
You'd have to go through the Department of Agriculture for the approval, and they have certain requirements. But your backyard wouldn't qualify unless it's 100 acres. I can't speak to the requirements of what an agribusiness is. It's up to the Department of Agriculture. This is once it's determined, once they have their license, once they're a farm winery and they are an agribusiness, they're trying to get to be able to sell other products, and they're being denied in some cases, and that was not the intent. Representative Clayton.
Mr. Chair, I'm not really at the point where I'm making a motion because I don't want to do anything that hostile, believe it or not. But we are starting to get closer to the 3 o'clock hour. We've got some pretty complicated questions, and I don't know if I necessarily want to make a motion to table so much as a friendly suggestion that maybe we just kind of hold over on this and leave the working open, so that might give us a little bit more time to speak with Ms. Beavers and with the Department of Ag so that we're all better able to make an informed decision. That would be something that I would like, and I think maybe others would, but I don't know if we necessarily need to take a vote. I'm just asking you real nice.
My intention is to pass this out in the interest of time. We have one day left tomorrow, and we possibly have a snowstorm. Then we have Monday, then all bills are dead. And so we've got other bills that we've got to get to.
Is there a motion on the table?
There is no motion on the table. We're discussing this amendment. There hasn't been a motion or a second. Charles.
If I could respond the representative's question. So agritourism is discussed in 32-1432, and it's defined, agritourism activity is defined as any activity which allows members of the general public for recreational, entertainment, or educational purposes to view or enjoy rural activities, including but not limited to farming activities, ranching activities, or historic, cultural, or natural attractions. An activity may be an agritourism activity whether or not the participant pays to participate in the activity. An activity is not an agritourism activity if the participant is paid to participate in the activity. And there's a provision for registration as an agritourism activity. One needs to register with the Secretary of Agriculture pursuant to KSA 32-1433. Registered agritourism location, it means a specific parcel of land which can be registered with the Secretary. And there's a definition of registered agritourism operator, which means any person engaged in the business of providing one or more agritourism activities. So the law with respect to agritourism can be found at 32-1432 and some subsequent statutes.
Okay, thank you. And Eddie, you had a correction. There is a motion. There's a motion that the bill be passed, right? Okay. The amendment doesn't have a motion yet. Right. Representative Miller.
And if I understand it, Mr. Chairman, the handouts were intended to represent a single motion.
Yes.
I would move that the balloon amendment as well as the attachments A through E be adopted along with the striking of lines 14 and 15 on page 1 and the renumbering of subsequent sections.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Representative Iwerkamp. Now we have a motion. Any further discussion? Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said striking lines 14 and 15 from page 1.
And renumber.
That's what about the character and reputation?
Yes, sir. Good
Okay.
character and reputation.
Okay, would that affect any other liquor laws? Because that's pretty in tune with other liquor-related licensors that we have. Is there a reason we pull it out of this one versus all of them, or just one at a time?
May I respond?
Representative Miller.
I think this is a good way to get the train started.
Charles, the question was, by striking those lines, did we strike it out of all liquor laws or just this particular law?
So as I understand the motion, it's just striking lines 14 and 15 on page 1 of the bill, which amends 41-2703, a provision in the Cereal Malt Beverage Act. So that's what we would be striking. And that language that is going to be removed is a person who is not of good character and reputation in the community where the person resides. So that language will be stricken.
Along with all the other balloon amendment?
Yes.
Correct. Any further discussion? Representative Shue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to make any other changes, but just want to note that I also don't love line 16 on page 1 there, but I'll just leave that as a comment.
Seeing no further discussion, you can close on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move my amendment.
Committee, you've heard the amendment. All in favor say yes.
Yes. Aye. Yes, he said to say yes.
Right.
I know you.
Or aye is fine. All against say no. Motion passes. Charles.
Chairman, just for clarification, as I understood the motion, it was to strike the language that we discussed on page 1 of the bill. And in addition, the balloon plus attachment A plus attachment B. Is that correct? See, all of them.
It was all of them. It was all of them, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do move that we pass HB 2688 out of committee favorably as amended. And I close.
You've heard the motion, committee. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All against say no. Motion passes. Stay tuned for tomorrow. Depending on the weather, we do plan to come back and work a couple of bills. Thanks. We're adjourned.